All right, everyone, we're back. And today we're going to be adding a drop functionality to the inventory system. And then I'm also going to do a couple other visual improvements to this as well. We're going to be adding a background blur when we hit our inventory key to open our inventory up or storage. And also I'm going to hide that center dot we have too when we're in inventory. So that won't get in the way of our menus and stuff. And then I'm going to do something for our inventory slots as well. I'm going to make the items that we're hovering over get a little bit bigger just so it looks a little bit better. We know what we're selecting. So I'm in my WBP inventory window widget. And this is the main window that we're going to have focus on when we're in our inventory. I want to add something so that this window is going to know when we have a button pressed down. So to do the drop, what I'm going to do is just add control. So if I control click an item, it's going to drop it. So if you want, you can make it shift or alt or whatever you want. I'm going to just add a modifier key in to the left click. So I'm just going to get a little bit of space over here. So I'm going to move some of this over, and I'm in the on key down function right now too. Going to move this stuff down a little bit. And then I'm just going to drag off this get key, and we're just going to do an equals, and I'm going to hit the keyboard and hit control. So now that's going to be looking for my control key. So then I'm going to drag off and do a branch, and coming off the false, I'm just going to run that into the branch that we already had here. And then I'm going to make a variable in here, and I'm just going to call it control pressed. And then I'm going to just drop that onto the true pin here and check that to be true. So now when we hold our control key down, when our control key is down, we're going to be setting this Boolean to be true. And that's all we're going to do in here. But before I leave, I'm just going to select the control, the branch. I'm going to select this equals and our get key here. And I'm just going to copy those 4 nodes. And then we're going to go into the functions tab, and we're going to go to override, and we want to look for on key up, and we're going to add that. So now if we paste in what we just copied here, we should have this. So we're going to plug our branch in. I'm going to plug my false in and then just take this set control pressed and return out. And then we're going to uncheck it. And we're going to drag off the return value and just do a handled. And we want to connect the in key event to our get key. So we should be set up like this now. So on key up, it's going to recognize left control key is up. If that's true, then we're going to set our control press to be false. So now our inventory window will be able to tell if we're holding control or not. So I'm going to compile, save that, and then we're going to go into our inventory slot. And then all we're going to do in here, I'm just going to get a little bit of room in here. And we're going to throw another branch down in here. And then I'm going to drag off the inventory here. And we're going to get main HUD. And then from main HUD, I'm going to drag off and we're going to get inventory window. And then from that inventory window, I'm just going to drag out, and now we can look for control pressed, and we want to get that. And then that's going to be our condition for this new branch here. And we actually want this last branch coming out of false. So I'm going to move that down to false. And I'm actually going to just move these down a little too. Okay, so we should be set up like this here. Now I'm going to go into the blueprint interface that we made for inventory. So the BPI inventory. And I'm going to add a new function in there just called drop. And we just have to add an input to this of item. And that's going to be of the type item struct. I'm going to save that, go back to our inventory slot. So now if control is pressed, we're going to call our drop pressed from our blueprint interface inventory here. And then we just want to make sure we run our item up to it. And we already have our item here. And we're going to grab this pin right here coming off our inventory. And we're going to use that for our target. So I'm going to compile, save that. We're going to go into our inventory component in the event graph, open up the interface tab, and now we have the drop there. And we already have a function that we made in our interface. So I'm going to get player character. And then I'm going to drag off this and type in inventory full, and we should get inventory full message. And we made this before, or if we try and pick up too many items in the world, this is going to be what's going to spit it back into the world, basically. So we're going to use that. And I'm going to grab the item and we're just going to pull the item down and drag it over and put it up into inventory full. And then I'm just going to grab a remove item, plug our inventory item into that. And then we're going to do an update inventory widget. Going to compile and save. And let's try that out. So we're going to jump in, grab some items. And now if we control and click, and there it is. So we're dropping items into the world now. So I want these items to collide with each other. So I'm going to go into our inventory folder, go into the items and the world item. And then I'm going to click static mesh, scroll down to the collision settings. And you can see that the world item we made is of the type world dynamic. So we want world dynamic to block world dynamic. So if we compile, save that, jump in again, now our objects should collide with each other. So now if we hold control and we drop these items out, you can see that they're now colliding with each other. So we can drop these items into the world now. We can pick them back up. We can use them. We can put them in storage. So I think we're all set here. We have our drop all set. All right, so we're going to do a couple other quick things here. So I'm going to add a background blur. So when our inventory is open or when we go in storage, the background will get blurred out. I'm also going to have that dot be hidden when we're inside of storage or inventory. And then I'm going to do something. We're going to make this image a little bigger when we hover over it. So as we hover over items, they'll pop out a little more. So we can take care of all that really quick. So I'm going to jump into the main HUD. Okay, so we're inside the main HUD here. And I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to look for a blur. And then we have background blur. So I'm going to drop that on the canvas panel. And then I want to drag this all the way up because that needs to be the first thing. So it'll be behind our windows. Okay, so just make sure your background blur is dragged all the way up. I'm going to set mine to 1920 by 1080. I want to make sure is variable is checked. And I'm going to set this to collapsed. And then for the blur strength right here under appearance, I'm just going to give mine 5. If you want less, you can do less or more. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to compile and save that. And then I'm going to jump into the inventory. And we're going to go to the show player inventory function we made here. And right here in the beginning, we already have our main HUD. So I can just drag off this main HUD. And I'm going to get blur. And then I can just put that right over the show inventory window. And we can plug that into the set visibility. So then whenever our inventory window is open, our blur will be visible as well. And I'm also going to hide our center dot in here too. But our dot's going to work opposite to what we're doing here. So I'm just going to add that to the back here. So we're going to go all the way to the back. Just going to get a little bit of room in here. And we have our main HUD here. So I'm going to drag off the main HUD. And we're going to get center dot. Then I can just drag off and set visibility. And I'm going to copy that and paste another one down here. So our set visibility on the top here, we're going to set the top one to be collapsed. So when our inventory is open, our center dot will be collapsed. We can set it back to visible when we close it here. So just make sure we plug the target into this bottom one too. So we can just grab from center dot and plug that in there. So let's check that out, see how that looks. So now when we open our inventory, you can see we got a little background blur. Our dot goes away. Open inventory, same thing. Dot goes away. We get a little background blur. So that looks a little bit better. And then there's one more thing I want to add just for looks here. I'm going to go into our inventory slot. And we already have this hovered and unhovered right here. So we're going to use that for something. So right now we're just using that to tell if we're hovering over a slot so that we can right click on it. What I want to do is grab the button out. And then I'll show you what we're going to do here. So you don't have to do this. This is just something I wanted to do. But if I hover over my button, you can see that the button is outlined in green and I gave it padding going around. So it has 5 padding going around and you can see that right here, 5 padding. So when I hover over it, I'm just going to change that padding to 0. So this image will get bigger. If we click on that button there, you'll see how it says slot overlay slot. That's what we're going to be looking at in the blueprint here. So yours should say the same thing. Maybe if you set yours up different, this will say something else, but mine says slot overlay slot. So I'm going to go into the graph. I'm going to drag off the button and I'm going to just type in slot. And you'll see that we got all these. So mine's set as overlay. So I'm going to pick as overlay. And then now if I drag off, I can set padding. And then I'm going to connect this in up here, copy, and we're going to paste another one in down here, connect the target up. So now when we hover, you can see how if we split this pin open, it's already set to 0. So when we hover over it, it's going to set the padding to 0. And then this one here, when we unhover, we want to set it back to 5 or whatever you put yours at. So for me, my default was 5. I'm going to do it. It's going to look a little nicer. So now when we hover over it, we're changing the padding to 0. When we unhover, it's going back to 5. So let's check that out and see what that looks like. So we pick up a few things now. You can see that now when we hover over it, that image gets bigger on there. And I kind of like that. It just adds a little bit extra to it. And it'll do the same thing in your storage too. So if you do add items in there and you hover over it. So I just finished recording and I realized that I never put a check in on the hovered. So when we were changing the padding to get the item size to go up and down here when we highlight, I wanted to do this and I forgot to put this in. So that's why this might look a little different, but I would say to just add this in too. So on hover, just put a branch and then get the item, break it, get the quantity, and just do a check for over 0. So if quantity is greater than 0, we can come out and set padding. If we don't do this, then the empty slots in our inventory, they're going to get bigger too when we hover over them. And that way it stops the empty spots from changing their padding size. So I think that's everything I wanted to do. We took care of our drop items. We have a little background blur. We got rid of the center dot. And we have our little windows, our little images getting a little bigger when we hover over them. So that's going to be it for now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.